Hey everybody, we're here to go ahead and reassemble this Nexus 6. If you missed the disassembly, I'll throw it down in the description of this video for you. The first thing that we need to do in this reassembly is put this metal framing back in. I like to do this starting with this rubber grommet down here at the bottom, just lining it up with a screw hole. There's a little cutout you can see where it kind of lines up. Just make sure it re-adheres back down. You need to make sure you pull out your digitizer cable, and so it goes over the top. There's these little clips on the sides here. You want to go ahead and snap those in, and this upper left hand corner has a little bit of adhesive underneath it. If it's not sticky still, don't stress it. Everything will be held in place still. So now that we have that frame in, we can go ahead and put our logic board back in. It's going to pull this digitizer cable. It's definitely still got some adhesive on the back side of it. Make sure you put it through the cutout, pull back the LCD cable, the AMOLED cable, and then line everything up. There's a couple of clips and screw holes that you want to make sure are lined up. One clip is at the upper right hand side, and the bottom is down here, and there's a little cutout right here. You can see my fingers at. You want to make sure that that's lined up, and it'll kind of clip back into place just right down here at the bottom as well. It may take a little bit at first. You don't have to be extremely tough with it. We're going to go ahead and start reattaching our ribbon cables, just sliding them in as far as they will go, and then pulling the lever shut. Do the same thing with our digitizer cable, making sure that it's re-adhered. It's a little bit trickier. Have to fold it over on itself, then push it in. So I like to put it flat on the connector and then slide it in first. And then we'll go ahead and snap that one shut as well, which is the opposite direction. Making sure that our rear-facing camera and our front-facing camera are still attached. This part down here just doesn't seem like it's snapped all the way in. There we go. Kind of line everything up. Make sure your front-facing camera is in its correct slot as well. You may have to wiggle it just a little bit to get it to fit it in there. The next thing that we need to put in is our first screw, which holds down the logic board up here at the top. It has that little metal bracket adapter. Basically, it's like a standoff for a screw. You can make sure you put this in the right direction, as it has a little cutout for the way in which it'll fit. It'll face down, covering the two little gold or brass connectors underneath it. Use our same Torx wrench we used to take the phone apart. Make sure it's in the hole and then screw it down nice and snug. You may have to try to align it just a little bit if it doesn't seem straight. You will have to screw a screw from the plastic housing to the back of this as well. So you want to make sure it lines up with that hole correctly. And our next step is to take our housing assembly. We'll go ahead and snap that on. Now if you wanted to see how to remove the battery or the volume power button, I'll have a separate video for that. So we're just going to make sure everything kind of lines up, all the screw holes are there. Just go ahead and push it down. It'll kind of snap back into place in a couple of spots up here at the top. It'll go ahead and snap back in. Mostly down the sides, it doesn't have any real snapping. It kind of feels a little flimsy when you put it back together until you put all of those 22 screws back in, right? So what we're going to do before we do much more is we're going to put 2 screws in down here at the bottom, and then we're just going to test it and make sure that it powers on and the touch function's working. And if I were you, before I put the back on, I would test every feature of this phone to make sure that everything's working before we put down about 1,000 strips of adhesive to put the back onto this phone again. Just put a couple in down here at the bottom. Make sure it's nice and snug, and then we can go ahead and flip it over and power it on. We're going to go ahead and put our power connector on. And then we'll go ahead and put our ribbon cable extender for the power volume on. I find it easier to do this with a spudger. What I do is I put the spudger against the crease in the cable and pull it back, and then push it in with my finger. So pushing the cable back a little bit, and then just trying to find that sweet spot in here. Sometimes you can use your spudger to push it on as well. So we're just going to go ahead and power the display on. You might want to put a couple sporadic screws in the back to make sure all the connections are being touched. We'll just let it power on here for just a few seconds. All right, here we go. Oh, and it's in Espanol. We'll go ahead and change that back to English. Perfect. So the screen is functioning for us. Power button's functioning for us as well. Now, if I were, like I was saying, if I were you, I'd go through and test all of the functions, the Wi-Fi, your charge port, all that stuff. Make sure that's functioning properly for you. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put all the remaining screws in the back of this. This will take a few seconds to do, so just bear with me while I do this real quick. Now, I could fast forward through this, but I'd rather give you an ideal time of how long it takes to do one of these builds. So I'm not going to fast forward. If you want to fast forward to the next portion, I can probably skip ahead about a minute and a half. You should not miss anything. Now, when you put in these screws in, you don't have to put them in extremely tight. They just need to be nice and snug. You also don't want to strip them out, as some of the smaller Torx screws are notorious for doing with a bit. Either the bit itself strips out or the screws themselves strip. So just put them in with a decent amount of pressure just to make sure they stay in. They have a little thread locker on them, so they shouldn't screw back out. But don't try to force them in too tight. Alright, now that we have all of the screws put in, what the next step is we're going to remove some of the adhesive off of the back of this phone. Now, what you could do is if you have enough adhesive on here and it came off perfectly in one piece, you could technically put it back together without putting down new adhesive. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that. These phones have the issue of having the back come off already. It's kind of a reported issue with the Nexus 6 is that the back itself will kind of pull away from the phone. Some handsets have had that issue, kind of like the bend gate with iPhones. So what I like to do is put down new adhesive. What I'm going to do is basically take my spudger and remove all of this 3M double-sided adhesive. It does come off in one piece normally. I'm going to do this on the back of the phone and also off the back panel, a battery cover to this device as well, which takes a little bit longer. There's usually a lot more on that than there is on this. So I'm just going to take my time and scrape all of the adhesive off of here. That way I don't get any lumps or weird features on the back of my phone when I'm done fixing it. Now it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but you want to get off as much as you can, so if you have any small pieces struggling on there, you may want to pull it off a little bit. Try to rub it to be nice and flat. Being a little bit tricky, this does not want to come off. Alright. Right, now that we got the majority of the adhesive off the phone, we're going to use some extra wide double-sided adhesive. We'll use some 5mm 3M double-sided adhesive. We're just going to cut it to fit the back of this. So I'm going to round the edges of some and put it down here across the bottom, just to kind of fit the corners. Now the corners are pretty important. You want to make sure that you get a lot of adhesive down in there. So make sure they're cut to fit and rounded so they kind of get into those round sides. Work our way down. Now, we're going to put a massive amount of adhesive on this thing. As you saw how much was on there when we first removed it, we're going to put down something similar to that so we don't have any lifting or any issues of the back of the phone wanting to come off. It doesn't have to be extremely pretty, but I would make it as uniform as possible. You don't want to have any squishy spots on the back of your phone where you can tell there's no adhesive behind it. Missed a piece here. Let's go ahead and pull that off. So anything I can put a longer straight line of adhesive in is what I'm going to put stuff on. Make it a little bit easier. Go ahead and work our way down the sides. Now, one thing you want to make sure that you don't do is that it rides up the side of the phone. You don't want any issues trying to put the back on, or it wanting to kind of lift back off with any wrinkles in the tape, or you put it up the side of the frame. So just make sure that you can leave a little bit of a gap around it. Just make sure you put it on nice and as uniform as possible. Perfect. Let's put some strips down here. And really the original backing almost had tape everywhere there wasn't a round cutout or hole in the back of this thing, so we want to make sure we put a decent amount of adhesive on there to hold everything back in. Right now that we got the majority of the middle portion of the phone, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing we did at the bottom, round some of the edges here, and work our way across the top. Now this does bend a little bit, and sometimes this 3M tape will let you move it around a little bit, let you bend it. Sometimes it's with this wider tape, it's a little too tricky to do, so you may have to, see my scissors are getting sticky, I'm going to have to clean them there. You may have to put in a couple different pieces of tape here to meet this bend up here at the top. Now it also had original adhesive around the camera lens, so you're going to want to put a decent amount around the camera area to make sure that you get a good adhesive seal. That way you don't have the back kind of flopping around back near the camera. I'm going to put some smaller pieces just around the center point here. This is where the Motorola logo kind of indents into this center hole. So we want to make sure that you're going to put your finger in that spot a lot. And you're holding your phone most likely, so you want to make sure that you put a decent amount of tape to hold all that in. And I'm not going to tape over this connector. I'm a little sketchy about taping over these ribbon cable connectors. If I ever have to open this phone up again, I don't want to cause any damage to it. Now just go ahead and fill in any little gaps that you see that you think might need a little extra tape to help it retain its form. Go ahead and put a nice strip up here. Well, just checking that piece. Put a strip down here at the bottom to make sure that it has this functionality. There's two spots in here that have a kind of a weird color. One in the upper left hand corner and then one down here at the bottom left. I didn't tape over those as well. Getting close here. Alright, we're looking good. We have a lot of tape on here, so it looks like it's going to hold up pretty nice. The next tricky part is go ahead and remove all the backing off of this tape. Just like I was saying, make sure that it doesn't wrinkle when you pull it up. To do that, I found the easiest way is to press down on the side that you're going to remove and then pull back on it. And that'll make sure the tape doesn't want to lift back up with the backing that you're removing. I'm going to pull all the backing off of this. Alright, we are almost done. Just one more piece of backing to go. Then we can take the back of our phone here and put it on. Now remember, I did clean off all the adhesive on the back side of this. We can go ahead and put that on so you can see it's nice and clean. Start here at the top, make sure those corners fit in, and then work our way down the sides of the phone. Make sure that it's spread all the way out. Then we can press into the middle of the phone and work our way through. Now if you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit that like button. I appreciate it. If you want to see future repair videos, hit the subscribe button. If you have any questions about the repair, go ahead and throw them down in the comments. Like I was saying, I'll have the power, volume button, the battery in the description if you want to watch that video as well. As always, I appreciate you watching, and I hope you see them on the next one.